in order to graph this, we're going to go ahead and use finding the intercepts. That's like what we learned yesterday, right? So we're going to take the y value and substitute 0. So essentially it goes away, right? And we're going to now solve for x. So what is the equation we're going to use to find our x-intercept? 60x equals what? 240, right? So we're going to go ahead and do 60x equals 240. Now, how do I solve this? Okay, so we're going to divide. And how many times does that go in? 40 times, right? So, oh, sorry. Thank you. 4. Okay. All right. So we get 4 for our x-intercept, right? Okay. Now, our x-intercept is going to be at 4, 0 on the graph, right? Because remember, I substituted 0 for the y value here. So that's why I put a 0 there, right? Okay, now, let's do the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, I substitute 0 for x. So when I substitute 0 for x, 60 times 0 makes nothing, right? Okay, and so what's my equation I get?
Y equals 240.
Is there even anything to solve here? No. Okay. All right, so I get y equals 240. Okay, and so that means my y-intercept is going to be 0 in the place for x and then 240 in the place of y. Now, isn't that a pretty high y-intercept? Yeah. Okay, so when we go to graph, we're going to make sure that we do our graph with like a pretty large scale along our y-axis, okay? Now, because the numbers along the y-axis are going up so high and the numbers in x are not going up very high, we don't have to do the same scale on each side of the axis, okay? And I notice here that all of the x's for my x-intercept are positive, but the y's are also positive, so I don't really need a lot of like negative values in my graph. So I'm just going to draw my graph kind of like more like this. Okay, more like a first quadrant graph. All right. Now, when I'm scaling my values on my y-axis, my graph needs to go all the way up to how much?
240.
240. So maybe I'll scale these by what? What do you guys want to scale them by? 20. It would still take me a while to get up to 240 if I did 20s. 50s. Okay, but if I do by 50s, this is not a multiple of 50, so then it wouldn't be like exactly on a grid line. I mean, I could just estimate. I heard someone say 60. Okay, I kind of like that idea because this is a multiple of 60. So let's scale it by 60. 60, 120. What would be next? 180. Then what? 240. And then 300, right? Okay. Now, let's just scale this side of the graph by 1s because I only need to go up to 4. Okay, and let's go ahead and graph our intercepts. Okay, so our x-intercept is at 4 on the x-axis, which is over here. And your y-intercept is at 240, which is up here. And then we're going to go ahead and take our straight edge and connect. Now, let me ask you guys, in this situation of this problem, is there ever going to be any negative values down here?
Yeah.
Like, because what did these numbers represent? What is the 240 representing from our original problem?
The
Yeah, the y-intercept, but what is the y-intercept representing?
Miles.
The number of miles. So will I ever have a negative number of miles that she drove? No. Okay. Also, if I allow this line to cross over here, then it's in a negative x value. Now, what was my x value representing? Do you guys? Well, it's positive, okay? But what are each of these representing? Like, if I'm at 1, then I'm at 180. If I'm at 2, I'm at 120. If I'm at 3, I'm at 60, okay? If I'm at 4, okay, I heard someone say miles per hour, but these numbers are not the miles per hour. They're the actual, the actual time, the hours, okay? So these bottom numbers are representing the time in hours. These side numbers are representing the distance left in her trip, or the distance remaining in miles, okay? So when she starts out her trip, she has 240 miles left to travel, and as the time passes, the distance she has gets less and less and less and less until now she has 0 miles left. But how long did that take for that to happen?
4 hours.
4 hours, right? Does that make sense what our graph is representing? Okay. So, a part of this problem asked you to graph it, which we already did, right? But it wants us to interpret the meaning of the intercepts. Okay? So we're going to interpret the meanings of the intercepts right now. Okay? So the x-intercept is representing the total time it takes for her to finish the trip, right? It takes her how many hours for her to finish the trip? 4, right? So the x-intercept represents the total time it takes to finish the trip or complete the trip, which is 4 hours. Does that make sense? Okay, now what was the y-intercept representing? Yeah, the total distance that she has when she starts, has to complete when she starts the trip, right? So the y-intercept represents the total distance she has to complete her trip. Right? Because when she starts out, how many miles does she have to drive to complete? 200 and what? 40, right? Okay. Are there any questions on that?